Hi. So I am going to talk about two cosmic consorts, cosmic principles, Agni and Soma. I was asked to do this by my friend Janice in Portland, who has been hosting me this past year to come up and teach on the topic of Soma and rejuvenation in her community in Portland, Oregon. And I'll be coming for the third time in September. And for this video, this is actually the third video in a series of three that I'm doing on the topic of Soma. And this one, Janice asked me to speak a little more directly to those who have a lot of experience, knowledge already in the Vedic field. So yoga, Ayurveda, yoga therapy, or yoga chikitsa, and so on. So that is what I'm going to do. And because of that, I'm going to plunge in a little bit on the deep end. So I'm going to pick up the topic that I ended with at the end of the first video that I did on the topic of Soma. And I will link the other two videos below after I do this one. First, I guess I'll just give a brief introduction. My name is Kaya, and I have been practicing as a yoga therapist for 18 years. And I am a yoga educator, training yoga teachers and yoga therapists and working with clients and students, particularly to help with processes of rejuvenation, softening, letting go, something that looks quite like restorative yoga, but isn't exactly restorative yoga. And I thread into the work that I do the full spectrum of the yoga tradition, all of the things that I've studied over many years of immersion with incredible teachers. So Ayurveda and Vedic astrology and Vastu and Vedanta and Tantra philosophy, all threaded together in the yoga education that I share with people. The topic of Soma is something that has been dear to my heart for some time, that has been a strong influence in my personal practice and understanding of yoga in my life. But it's only something that I've been out of the closet with teaching for the past year publicly. So I'll start by just defining Soma and Agni. I'm emphasizing Soma, you'll see as we move along, because it is something that is a big blind spot in the yoga world right now. So Agni means fire, and Agni is actually the very first word of the Rig Veda, which lets us know that it is keenly important. And it is said in Ayurveda that the Agni must be cared for primarily. So Agni means fire. It is all in nature, all in manifestation that is fiery in nature. So everything that is metabolic, all that devours, all that purifies, all that heats, all that lights, anything associated with Agni has to do with fire or fieriness. Digestion, your digestion is associated with Agni, but all of the metabolic processes in your body are associated with Agni as well. Any source of intensity, desire is associated with Agni, because desire burns like a fire, burns the mind and body like a fire. Anything that kindles digestion or kindles action is associated with Agni, or is considered a form of Agni. The sun, the great luminary, the sun in the sky, is associated with Agni. And we can say that half of the devas, the gods of the Vedic tradition, are associated with Agni. We'll say that the other half are associated with Soma. So Soma is the consort of Agni, and Soma is associated with the other luminary in the sky, the moon. So Soma also glows, but with a soft, swelling, nourishing glow. Soma is that which nourishes, that which supports. Soma is associated with love, including divine love, or what is known in the yoga tradition as bhakti, or supreme love. That includes all love at every level of manifestation. Soma technically means that which swells or expands. It's associated with juiciness and softness, and it is associated with divine mothering. Since it is the nutritive cosmic quality, then mothering and mother's milk are associated with Soma and the divine feminine, whereas Agni is associated with the divine masculine and all that is encompassed there. I'm emphasizing principle of Soma because it is a big, as I said, a blind spot in the yoga world. Our day-to-day life in modern culture, and especially in the West, has a huge overemphasis on the qualities of fire, on the Agni side of life. So we place huge emphasis on striving, strategizing, forward thinking. We put a huge emphasis on competition, on challenging ourselves and others, on critical thinking and criticism of self and others. We never stop. We're always moving. And this is taken over the yoga world because our minds are so entrenched in Agni, in the fire principle, in the masculine side of things. This has taken over everything in life, including yoga. And so more and more, there is an emphasis on yoga as a process of fire, as a purification process, as a burning, heating process, as a practice which is constantly moving, never stopping, lots of pushing and striving and achieving, lots of standing on your head and bringing heat to the head, lots of vinyasa, flowing, moving from pose to pose, lots of achieving a certain number of sun salutations, and so on. So all of those practices have a place and a value because Agni has a place and a value in manifestation naturally. But the problem is when we overemphasize one of what Ayurveda people in the world will know as one of the pairs of opposites. Agni and Soma are opposing or consort. So as soon as we exaggerate one side, we automatically diminish the other. So as we're increasing the fire in life or in yoga or in diet in the form of a diet that's based on too much purification, for example, or too much heat, as soon as we exaggerate Agni, we naturally will diminish the Soma. So what is lost when we increase Agni, we lose nourishment. We lose the mothering principle of love for others and love for self. We lose the capacity for softening and expanding and swelling. And most importantly, we lose the capacity for satisfaction and allowance. You can think of Soma as being associated with a deep sense of inner satisfaction, a deep sense of glad acceptance or allowance, which we can do when we feel deeply satisfied. We easily allow things to be as they are. When we allow things to be as they are, we feel deeply satisfied. This is Soma. Agni is associated with dissatisfaction, which is part of the problem, if not the problem of the human condition. We feel a lack, we feel incomplete. That sense of dissatisfaction creates strong, fiery desire, causes us to worry, causes us to strive, causes us to strategize, and it pushes us in life. There's a value to that, but the problem is we have too much of Agni and we're depleting the Soma. I came out talking about Soma this year because I saw so many people starting in 2016, 2017 in particular, suffering from severe depletion, whether diagnosed or undiagnosed forms of depletion. And so it was clear to me it was time to be more public, talking about Soma and cultivating Soma and helping people to do that. So that's why I'm talking about it now and why I'm teaching about it in Portland. But I want to share with experienced yoga practitioners and teachers and Ayurveda people something about Kundalini, as I mentioned, because I think it's very useful information and creates also a good metaphor for all of the ways in which we overemphasize Agni and diminish the Soma. And so most yoga people, Ayurveda people, are familiar with Kundalini. Kundalini is described as a fiery, serpentine capacity for spiritual growth, seated at the base of the spine, a capacity or a spiritual process which moves in a fiery way, in a purifying way, ascending up the spine in the subtle body. What is done in the yoga world is a lot of stimulation of the Kundalini, a lot of emphasis on driving Kundalini upward through fiery processes, fiery pranayama practices and asana practices and contemplative practices and so on. What is not known is the Soma, the consort of Kundalini, which ascends up, which aspires up in a purifying and heating way as a form of Agni. The consort of Kundalini Shakti is the Soma. The Soma is described as being seated at the top of the spinal cord, or described as being in the deep center of the head, or sometimes described above the head as the 9th chakra. And the Soma is meant to pour down. The Soma nourishes. The Soma expands, swells, and protects the whole subtle body, including all of them that influences the physiology and the mind and emotions, but also specifically the Soma is associated with the Sushumna Nadi. That is the channel in which Kundalini Shakti rises. It's understood in the ancient tradition, this piece has been lost now, that before Kundalini is encouraged upward, the Sushumna should be prepared with Soma. So the Soma should be cultivated and expanded. The Soma, which rains down like nectar, it is described in the Shiva Samhita. The Soma in the head rains down a moon-like ambrosia, and it pours down and it nourishes and prepares and protects the Sushumni and the whole body as preparation for Kundalini to come up. When this is done, then the process of Kundalini, or any spiritual process, which is a naturally fiery, transformational, purifying process, that spiritual process doesn't wreck the body, doesn't disturb the nervous system and thus the mind, doesn't cause disturbance in life, but moves the Kundalini process, or the spiritual process, takes place in a natural, easeful, almost undetectable, joyful, blissful way. And it moves in such a way that in fact remains. It doesn't just come up and then go down, stimulate something and then diminish again, because it is constantly nourished by the Soma raining down. Also, you don't really have to stimulate a Kundalini process or a spiritual process when there is a fullness of Soma. I describe it like this. If you put a delicious pie on the table, you don't have to then drag people to the table to eat the pie. The people come to devour the pie naturally, and the people don't go hungry. They remain happy and blissful and undisturbed, having eaten something nourishing and delicious. So like that, when the Soma nourishes the system, nourishes the Sushumna, Kundalini naturally rises in order to partake of that nectar, of that ambrosia. This is the natural order of things that has been largely forgotten in the yoga world. I'll say that the Ayurveda people already have this known to them, because it is understood in Ayurveda That, for example, we don't do a purification process without a natural nutritive preparation process. We nourish and prepare the system, the body and the mind first, and then we do purification second. But the only reason we do purification then is for what Ayurveda people will know as rasayana, so that we can then re-nourish, stabilize, nutrify, love up the system. The only reason for purification or for Agni is for the purpose of Soma. But before we bring in Agni, we also have to nourish and protect with Soma. So Agni is meant to be a fire that is alighted within a lot of Soma, before Agni Soma, during Agni Soma, after Agni Soma. Another metaphor that I use for this when I teach Agni and Soma together is a ghee lamp. So if you've ever gazed upon or even made your own ghee lamp, you know that the ghee lamp is made of mostly ghee. The ghee is Soma. It is a Soma food, and it nourishes and protects, but also allows the fire to alight. The fire is like this. The ghee surrounds, nourishes, and protects the fire. The ghee sustains the fire while the fire slowly devours the ghee. And this is the principle of Agni and Soma. So what am I teaching in September? In Portland, I will be teaching a full weekend all about the principle of Agni Soma. I'll be teaching a 5-part Soma mantra, which brings in some elements of Agni to make use of the Soma, to digest the Soma, but is mostly a Soma mantra. This would be the opposing practice to what many people know as the seed mantras of Kundalini, or of the main 6 chakras of the spine. Those seed mantras are Agni mantras, and we'll be doing the balancing Soma mantras that weekend. We'll also do pranayama practices, which balance the left, the Soma side, and the right, the Agni side, that balance the ascension and the descension, the Soma, the Agni which rises and the Soma which moves down, the inhalation and the exhalation, which inhalation is Soma, bring in the nourishing breath, exhalation is Agni, we breathe it out in a purifying way. So we'll be doing pranayama for Agni and Soma. We'll be doing, of course, yoga poses, asana practices with a strong emphasis on Soma, and then introducing key elements of fire of Agni. And I'll culminate the weekend with 2 primary, what you can call peak practices. One I call Soma flow, and that brings together slow, conscious spinal movement in combination with pranayama and mantra. And I'll also be teaching the Mahamudra, the great stamp, or the great full body mudra. That is a very advanced practice, which is like a vehicle that drops you off in meditation. But I'm teaching it in such a way that is accessible to nearly everyone. I've taught many body types and many different levels of experienced students this version of Mahamudra, which balances the Agni and the Soma, or the Ida and Pingala, for those who know those terms. I'll also be weaving in teachings of Tantra from the Shiva Samhita on the principles of fire and Soma. And Vedanta teachings on how to live a life that takes into account these cosmic principles. And finally, my husband, who's been a practicing Vedic astrologer, Jyotishi, for the last 13 years, he'll be coming in and teaching Agni and Soma in the form of the great luminaries, the sun and the moon. And he'll teach you some daily, simple, accessible practices that you can do to align with the luminaries. The sun and the moon each rule particular days of the week. And so he'll teach that and teach you the Vedic astrology perspective on Agni and Soma, and how those are expressed through sun and moon, and how to align yourself naturally with those cosmic, divine expressions in your daily life of fire and water, Agni and Soma. We have taught this as a teacher training program to teachers, and teachers are still coming and sending us notes about the profound results of that experience that are continuing to unfold in their personal practices and in their teachings. And many of the people that did the previous 2 immersions on Soma in Portland are coming back for this one on Soma and Agni. And it's so lovely to grow a Sangha together of really experienced, deep yogis and practitioners in the healing arts and psychotherapeutic arts and so on. I've been really resonating with this teaching, which is very exciting for me. As I said, it's dear to my heart, and I look forward to sharing more. You can pop any questions about this in the thread below, and I'm happy to answer. And I think that's everything, except that I want to add that in my experience, the Soma side of yoga is something that most experienced yogis come to very naturally. And so you may already be emphasizing, knowingly or unknowingly, or craving the Soma side of things. I find that many experienced yogis, yoga teachers, eventually, sooner or later, start doing less movement and more meditation. This is very natural, or more contemplation, or their shavasana, which used to be a little bit at the end of their practice, suddenly is at the beginning of their practice, in the middle of the practice, and in the end. Experienced yogis naturally mature towards what the tradition itself describes as the more deep side of yoga, the Soma practices of yoga. And so if you've been craving this in your practice or already gravitating towards Soma, you'll find that you get a language, a syntax for something that's unfolding for you naturally, as well as some really practical and blissful tools for bringing the Soma side of yoga to your personal practice, to your teaching, to the way that you understand your practice and your teaching at a more cosmic and profound level, so that anytime you're sharing yoga with others or doing yoga practices for yourself, you're coming from a nourished Soma place. So I hope this is helpful. I'd love to see you in Portland. This is one of the last times this year that I'll be teaching. I'm moving on to another topic of emphasis next year. And so I hope to see you then. Om Shrim Somaya Namaha.